Well, my name is Steve Plank. Nobody calls me Steve. Everybody calls me Planky. Plankytronics, that's my sort of handle for Twitter and my web and my blog and so on. And I'm a cloud evangelist at Microsoft. So when you think about Azure, Azure is more than just this bit here, cloud services. Everybody you hear this phrase, cloud services, Windows Azure, or Microsoft Azure Cloud Services. But I've taken this is out of the portal. I've taken it, turned it sideways, and this is basically all the different services. So Azure is big. When I first started, it was this, Cloud Services and Azure SQL DB, and that was it. There was nothing else. Very shortly after that, they started to add things like Service Bus and Access Control Service and so on. But this has just gradually grown over a period of time. Some of these things don't they don't sort of fit into cloud. Like, for example, Visual Studio Online. You know, it just happens to be that Azure is a really good delivery vehicle for delivering this, and people who want to be doing cloud development and doing that kind of thing, this is a great delivery vehicle for it. But it's not, you know, I wouldn't say it's cloud computing in the sense that something like a virtual machine running in one of our data centers in another part of the world is. Okay, so it's a lot. The bit that I'm going to talk about today, just to get you started, is the bit where all the compute happens. So, there's a little bit missing off the end here. Websites. So there's websites, virtual machines, mobile services, and cloud services. This is where you can get computers to execute instructions and execute your code. I mean, that happens a little bit on some of this other stuff down here, but this is mostly infrastructure to support this stuff. Now, at the moment, we've got 13 data centers around the world. The number of data centers is growing all the time. When I first started, which was about 3 years ago, we had 8 data centers. So if you look at where these are, you can see there's 2 in China. The thing about the Chinese data centers is that you have to register at this URL, and you'll understand it if you're Chinese, because you go there and it's just a bunch of Chinese characters. Basically, you have to be in China, so you have to go through the Chinese registration. You have to be in the Chinese borders to be able to see those data centers. There's 2 in Japan, there's 2 in Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia. There's 2 in Dublin. Strangely, the one that's to the west is called North Europe, and the one that's to the east is called West Europe. But there you go, Dublin and Amsterdam. Then there's North, South, East and West US and Brazil. So all those data centers exist today. This year we will be delivering 2 other data centers in Australia, one on the Western Australia, one in Eastern Australia. And there are also a whole bunch of CDN, Content Delivery Network endpoints, all around the world, 23 of them. Some of them align with existing data centers, and some of them, they're just in where there are centers of population. So if you want to get the content that you have on, let's just say, your website to where your customers are, you can see this is where most of the world's population tends to live, or most of the world's population that has good access to technology. I just want to show you a video of how Generation 4, there are 6 generations of data center that we operate. To give you some idea, the previous diagram, the Chicago data center, the one in the north, is the same size as 9¼ football pitches, soccer pitches, not American football pitches, although I don't believe there's a great difference in the size of the 2 pitches. And there are 6 generations of data center. The one that is the most interesting, I think, from a sort of a building data center's point of view is the Gen 4 data center. And I'll just show you this video of how a Gen 4 data center is built. We start with framing, flooring, server racks, transformer, control panel, partitions, fans, exhaust dampers, bus bars, servers, lights, mixing dampers, air washer drain pipes, air washer supports, air washers, intake louvers, filters and louvers, skill. And then we've got our shipping container with our computers in it. Then that is called an IT pre-assembled component, and we have some for computers, for cooling, and for power. We provide 3 connections to each of these things, and you notice they don't live inside a building, they live outside. A Gen 4 data center, everything's outside. Very easy to swap things. So the swappable unit isn't the hard drive or the power supply or even the entire rack-mounted server inside the unit. It's the entire 40-foot shipping container with all of these thousands of servers in it. So what happens is, we get a failure, our power supply fails, we mark the power supply as failed, we move the workloads off that machine, put them somewhere else. Something else fails, we move the workloads. Something else fails, we move the workloads. When there's a reasonable number of failures inside the shipping container, then we swap the entire shipping container. So that's the kind of operations that the Gen 4 data centers work on. The Gen 5 and Gen 6 data centers, of which are being built in Dublin right now, the difference between a Gen 1 and a Gen 6 data center is just the pure density that they can fit of total number of servers per square foot of floor area. It's incredibly high. The computers that we use are custom built for Microsoft. We don't have our own manufacturing plant or anything like that, but we work with the large computer manufacturers and say, this is a spec of a board that we want. You know, a circuit board will have 2 computers on it, 2 servers on it. So it's just one board, but it's actually got 2 servers on it. It may have multiple cores, as you'd expect. When I talk about data, each data center, there's 2 data centers here. Each data center will store your data 3 times in the data center across 3 different fault boundaries. So the data gets stored across different routers, different network segments, different battery backup units, different power supplies, so that it would take pretty catastrophic failure to lose all 3 copies of your data. But you might lose 1 copy of your data. Let's imagine that disk there caused you to lose 1 copy of your data. Well, that's okay, because we've got a data center, we've got 2 other good copies of the data. It means we can just mark that disk as bad and get the data from somewhere else, some other place where it's already stored. Now, by default, what happens is the data in one data center is automatically paired up with another data center. In Europe, it's the 2 European data centers, Dublin and Amsterdam. So if I start writing data into Dublin, my data will automatically be geo-replicated to Amsterdam. There's an API that I can use to tell me sort of what the delay is, how long that delay is. It's not something which happens instantly. It's something which is happening every few seconds. So what that means is that you have your new data in the other data center as well. So it gives you pretty good protection against something drastic happening. So if you had the failure of an entire data center, like the Dublin data center, and bear in mind that the Dublin data center is right next to the Amazon AWS data center in Dublin. And about 2 years ago, the Amazon data center was taken out, the entire data center was taken out by a lightning strike. Well, we are literally right next door to it. So that lightning strike could have just gone, sort of 25, 30 meters to the right-hand side, and that would have taken out our entire data center. So a lot of people always think, an entire data center being taken out is things like an earthquake. No. It can be things like lightning strikes and those sorts of things. So a pretty common phenomenon could take out an entire data center, but at least you would have access to your data. Okay, now you can get started for free. You can activate a free subscription. I've done it quite a lot of times, and I run out of live IDs and credit cards to do it with, because there's a fraud check to make sure you don't just keep registering the same credit card and never ever pay for any services. But there's some URLs you can use here. There's a free trial, this one here. That gives you a 30-day trial and £200 to spend on resources. If you're an MSDN subscriber, you can add MSDN benefits to your subscription. So depending on whether you're Ultimate or Professional or what's the other one? Whatever the other one is. If you're a BizSpark member, so BizSpark is a program operated by Microsoft to help startups get started with using Microsoft software. It's a 3-year program. You sign up to BizSpark. There's some criteria. For example, you have to be, I think it's less than $1 million or less than 5 million turnover. One of those 2, I can't remember what it is. So, it's a genuine startup, not a huge business that's already established. 3-year program, you get access to all of the Microsoft software on MSDN to use for free. And you can use it in production as well. So you can use Office, for example, Visual Studio, those kinds of things. And you also can add Azure benefits to your BizSpark subscription. And if you want to talk to somebody about that, there's a lady here called Elena who you could talk to about that afterwards. And then there's the Microsoft Partner Network as well. So if you're part of the Partner Network, you can add Azure benefits to your subscription. Okay, I'm going to show a video now. Okay, so when you want to sign up for a free trial subscription, you end up on this page. Signing up to a free Azure trial is simple. First of all, log into your Microsoft account. This is what used to be called a live ID. If you've got an @hotmail.com, @live.com, or @outlook.com ID, use that. If not, to get a Microsoft account, go to signup.live.com and you can sign up for one there. Once you have it, go to http://aka.ms/mscloudtrial. That will take you to this page where you click the Try It Now button. You can see here it's already extracted a little bit of information about me from when I logged in using my Microsoft account. I need to enter a telephone number, and I should expect either a text message or a call depending on what I selected. They'll give me a special one-time code. Now this is part of the anti-fraud measures. After I've clicked the send button, I need to get hold of the number they sent and type it into the verify code box and then click the button. I can now enter credit card information. Now you will not be charged. Your spending limit will be set to 0.00. This is just an additional anti-fraud measure. An identity check is done using the card. This just ensures you aren't an anonymous person who wants to use the service for some kind of criminal or illegal purpose. So it's now just a case of simply filling in the credit card information. Once that's done, agree to the terms and conditions. And in this case, I bail out of receiving marketing communications and then click the Sign Up button, which is now complete. Now click the Portal button in the top right corner and you come to a little welcome wizard. You might want to read these items, but I'm skipping through because I've read it all before. You're now logged into the Azure portal. You can see your credit status in the green box at the top of the screen. This is not money you have paid. This is the free amount of credit Microsoft gives you as part of the free trial. That's it. You're done. Now, anytime you want to get back to the portal, for example, if you want to create a website, just go to http://manage.windowsazure.com and log in. Great. So I just want to do a demo now of creating an ASP.NET website just to give you a flavor of how that works. Okay, for this demo, I'm going to show you how quickly you can use Visual Studio to create websites. So into the Visual C# web node, I'm going to create a web form application. I've already got Windows Azure set up as part of my subscription. It now asks me for these site settings. These are just like credentials for the database server and so on. Say OK to that. And it's going to go away and create for me a local project, which will be my web application. And you can see down here towards the bottom left-hand corner, it says it's also creating the website itself. And it says it's now ready. I called the site Web Application 92644. Perhaps I should have given it a better name than that. But that means it should be ready. So let's go and have a look. Websites. There it is, Web Application 92644. So we should be able to connect to that. And it should just come up saying the website has been successfully created, which it has done. I haven't actually deployed the code that's running in here, so the website looks like that. So let's do that next. In fact, let's make a change to the code. So let's go into the default web page, into the design. We know it's actually Planky ASP.NET. Let's save those changes, and now I will use web deploy. So I click publish. It says, how do I want to deploy this website? I'll use web deploy. These are the various credentials. This is the configuration that I want to deploy, and this is just a preview. So I now click publish, and you can see down here in the bottom left hand corner, right in the corner there, it says that the publish has started. So let's give that a few moments to complete. And that looks like it's succeeded. So if we go to the site itself, I've got a few here from previous demos. But that's the site. So you can see there's the name change there. So let's make it back into something like planky.asp.net. Let's do that. So we come in here. We make the change. Planky.asp.net. And that'll do. Let's save that. And let's go back and republish. Publish again, looking down the bottom, down here. So we've now got those changes. So if they were code changes, they'd have been pushed to the website in just the same way. So you can see, I mean, there's a number of different ways of publishing here, but it's very, very quick to create websites when you're using the combination of the development tools and Windows Azure together. So that, it's a fairly quick sort of thing to do. Creating a website, very easy to do. Question there? Right. Yeah, well, I don't know actually. Does anybody happen to know whether there is a command line interface for web deploy? Yeah, but what if you wanted to use Web Deploy from Visual Studio? Okay, so there is a command. So it's just the same as using Web Deploy in your own environment, except you're now doing it to Windows Azure. Okay. Yeah. So there's some other stuff you might want to do to neaten this up afterwards. You could register a domain with GoDaddy. You can tell Windows Azure websites that you want to use that domain name, and it will register that domain name for you. Yeah. The one thing that we don't have in Azure yet is our own DNS sort of, like registrar. So you've got to go to a third-party DNS registrar to get your domain name in the first place. Okay, let's go back. Where did I get to? That was a video in case it all went wrong. So next thing is creating a server. In case some of these things go wrong, I've got a video of every single one of them, just in case of a failure. The last time I presented here, I got halfway through the thing and all the lights went out and just everything just died for about 15 minutes. So I'm protecting against that. So next thing you might want to do then is create a server. Just create a server to do something with it. I don't know, install IIS on it, install an app onto it if you want to do that. Not that you really need to because you've got Azure websites and it's much easier to manage. But maybe you want to deploy an application. So let's go through the process of doing that. The simplest thing to do in Windows Azure is to create a Windows Azure virtual machine. So I click on the Virtual Machines tab here. I click New, Virtual Machine, and I can go to the gallery. And you can see in this gallery there are all sorts of machines: SQL servers, Windows servers, Oracle servers, Linux servers, and at the bottom here are a list of all the machines that I've ever created, the disks for all the different machines that I've ever created. So I'm going to go for the simple option and choose a Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. I can also pick the release date, so you can see these are basically every month. It's the latest set of patches which have been installed onto them, so I'll pick the latest one. I'll give this one a name. And I can pick either basic or standard. The basic machines, which is this lot here, A0 through to A4, cannot be load balanced. So they're very slightly cheaper than the standard ones, and you'll see lots of these sizes are the same. A0 through to A4 are the same, and there are some bigger sizes here as well. So for example, there's an 8-core 56 gig machine. And soon on its way 112 gigs and 224 gig machines as well. So I'm just gonna pick I'll pick a standard machine because the process is no different. And then I put in a username for the administrative account. I can't choose admin or administrator. Let me get this. And I click the next button. And now I need to put it into a cloud service. A cloud service is just like a way of gathering resources together, and it gets a name. So this one is called plankywebinar.cloudapp.net. I could, if I wanted to, put it into any of the existing cloud services that I have, but I'll stick with that. So it's going to be plankywebinar.cloudapp.net. That's how I can get access to that machine. And then I'm going to put it into a particular data center. In this case, I'm going to put it into North Europe. But you can see the range of data centers I have available. Different ones in the US, Brazil, Europe, East Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan. Okay, I've already got a storage account, so I'll just put it into that. But I could, if I wanted to, just create a brand new storage account. It will automatically generate a storage subsystem for me to store the data in. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put it into my camp here. I won't worry about an availability set. And I can also specify if I'd like to add any additional protocols. Like, for example, I might want to add the HTTP protocol. And that says that on the internet, I connect on port 80, and the load balancer will connect me to port 80 on this machine. I've got remote PowerShell here as well, and I've also got a remote desktop. Notice it says the public port here is automatically generated. What that'll do is it'll generate a high port number. I could even put one in here like 50245. And that's a way for me to connect to this machine if there are two machines in the same cloud service. Talk about that in a minute. And then I could optionally install some extensions like the Puppet Enterprise Agent or the Chef Agent for if I've got a Puppet server or a Chef server. I'm just going to install the standard VM agent, which does things like For example, one of the features that's quite nice in it is the ability to debug website without having to have Visual Studio installed on the machine itself. And then I click Go. It's now starting the provisioning process. It's now provisioned and you can see it starting. And while it's in this state, if I click the arrow just here, it gives me a dashboard. And clearly this graph won't be filled out because it hasn't been running long enough to fill any data out yet. It allows me to give some more detailed monitoring. I can configure this service with for example, the size of the virtual machine that I chose. I just chose an A1 there. I could change it to some larger or smaller size if I wanted to. And endpoints as well. So this one's got the HTTP endpoint added. I'm going to remove that in a minute just to show you what happens. So it's still starting. And you can see now it's now running provisioning, so that's an extra step after the operating system has started. That's doing things like putting the agent onto the machine and configuring the machine into its network environment. I think I'll also show you that virtual machines have to live inside a container which is called a cloud service. And you can see those cloud services here. And you can see I've got one called Planky Webinar. It's created, it's currently running. It's actually running some internal code at the moment. If I just quickly have a look in here, interesting thing to look at is the instances. And it says that that instance is running and still provisioning. So there is a link between these things here, Windows Azure Virtual Machines and cloud services, and the link is that Windows Azure Virtual Machines live inside cloud services. You can't have a virtual machine without a cloud service. You can actually have a cloud service without a virtual machine, but not the other way around. So it now says it's running. In theory, that means we should now be able to connect to it. So let's give that a go. So there's a button down here which says connect. When I click that button, it tells me it's going to shortly receive a prompt to open a file. So let's say OK to that. Here is the file. It's an RDP file. I could either save that to my desktop. It's a remote desktop protocol file, or I could just open it, connect, put in the username, which is /, which specifies the machine that I'm connecting to, Planky, and then the password. Hang on a minute. The password that I specified when I was creating the machine in the portal. Click OK. So you'll be familiar with this kind of thing. It's securing the connection to the server over the internet, and then I say I will connect to this server. So it's now connecting, and it's building the desktop of the machine. So let's give that a few minutes to complete. Which is probably done by now actually, so let's have a look. So there we are. Yes, I will do this on my network. I will look for networks. It's a server 2012, so let's have a look at it. The host name was Planky Webinar, that's what I called it. It was Windows Server 2012 R2. And what's happened there? Oh, it's opened up the server manager. Okay, so I've created a server that I can now configure. And I could do, for example, adding roles and features. It's currently collecting inventory data because it's a brand new machine that's just been provisioned. But what I was going to show was adding an IIS web server. But there's no need to do that because it's just a simple addition of a role. So there you go. Creating a virtual machine. It's as simple as just filling in a wizard, waiting for the machine to boot, and then connecting to it over RDP. There's a lot more you can do with this, but we don't really have time to go into the detail. But if you just simply want to create a virtual machine, just follow these instructions. Okay, so that's VM. It's very simple. You know, just go through the process. Click, 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 click. You get a VM, connect to it, then start installing stuff onto it. You know, copy files onto it, run setup.exe, run IIS configurations, install your code onto it. You become responsible for managing the entire machine exactly as you would do if it was in your own data center. Okay, so if it needs to be patched, you're going to have to patch it. If it needs to have a service pack applied, you're going to have to do it. If the hard drive for the operating system is 97% full and it's running like a dog, it's you that's going to have to deal with that problem. Okay, so there's other ways of dealing with those things. With Azure websites, for example, all you get to see is the website, and all of the management of that is done for you underneath the covers. You never get to see that. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So the next one is mobile services. So a mobile service is, I think you may have seen that in Bayat's talk, but maybe I'll just go through the whole process of creating it very quickly. So a mobile service is where you have a mobile device and you want to do things like store data, do authentication, do push notifications, a couple of other things. But you want to have basically a set of APIs that are managed for you, that the infrastructure is managed for you, and that are very easy to call, and for which we also provide client software that you can instantiate inside all the different sorts of platforms. So let's have a look at that. For this demo, I'm going to create a mobile service. So I've already got one there, but I'm going to create a brand new one. And I'll click Create. I'll give it a URL. Mobile Planky. So the URL of the mobile service will be mobileplanky.azuremobile.net. I'll use an existing SQL database. I'm going to deploy this into North Europe. And I'll use a JavaScript backend because that's the simplest one to do. The options are JavaScript or .NET, which is either C# or VB. Then it comes up with a suggestion of the various databases I could use. I'll use this one, and I know the password for the login for that. So this is a database that I already have as part of my Azure subscription. Click OK, and it only usually takes a few seconds to create the mobile service. Okay, so that's ready. If I now drill into it, and we can see that this single mobile service can be used for providing a back-end cloud data source, data service for Windows Store applications, that's Windows 8 applications, Windows Phone 8 and 8.1, iOS, Android, HTML, JavaScript, Xamarin, and PhoneGap. So I could have any one or all of these clients talking to this single service. Now it's a pretty simple process. I'm going to download it's called the Quick Start application. It's just an application to get me started. Now it's a 1, 2, 3 process. 1, install the tools, install the Android developer tools, and this takes you off to a link to do that. I've already got them installed. Here they are. It's Eclipse with the Android developer SDK installed. The next thing is to create a table. Now this application is a to-do list, and we create a to-do item table. So I click that, and it will go away and create that table for me. And then I'm going to download the application itself. So I click download. I'll save this, and I'll save it into my Android folder. And it's called mobileplanky.zip. Make sure I haven't done any previous demos with that name. No, I haven't. Save that. And now I can open that folder, and let's just extract all of that. Okay, so I should now be able to, let's go into that folder there. I should now be able to import this into the Android developer tools, an existing Android code, and I've got to browse for that folder. I'm pretty sure it's that one there. Oops, did I get it wrong? Oh no, there it is. Okay, so what you can see in here is a few interesting things. There's a mobile services, it's a binary jar in here which gives me my mobile services client, and there's some code. And the code is in these various to-do activities, or these various to-do items, and there's the Java code for the to-do activity. So if I just show you a few things in here, we import a whole load of things that we need from the mobile services client. And then down here there is a piece of code which creates a new mobile services client, or a new object, mobile M client of type mobile services client, and you can see the URL of the service is already included, and a special it's called the application key. An application key is also included. And then there are various methods. So we drill down into this, we'll see, well, we can see here actually, there's a load of code here to create a table object which represents the table that's running in the mobile service. And let's just try and find a method down here. There's adding a new item. So there's a method here for adding an item, and what this does basically is it goes to the table and it inserts an item, and then there's a table operation callback, so that we don't have the UI waiting around for this work to complete. Now let's not worry too much about the code. Let's go and have a look at the mobile service itself. So if I now click on mobile services, drill into this mobile service, I can see in the data there is the to-do item table that I created earlier, and we'll see it's empty. It currently contains no records. If I go back and if I go to some of these other things, there's a scale button here, or a scale tab here, and that allows me to scale the thing between free, basic and standard editions. If I go to standard, then it means I can scale up to 5 units, and if I go up to standard, then I can scale up to 10 units. So I have a way of scaling here, and I can also set up scheduled times that I might want this to happen, or I could also specify that I'll scale by a metric. For example, I could scale by the total number of API calls. So I could say when I get to get to these kind of numbers, scale up as the number of API calls goes up, start scaling the service up until I get to 8 units, and then as the number of API calls goes down, start scaling it down until I get to a minimum of 4 units. And that way I know that I've always got on hand 4 units for good execution, good response, but I'll never get a bill that takes me any higher than 8 units. Okay, so let's run the application itself. So I click, where's the run button? So I do run. I've got the emulator running over. Oops, I need to just say it's an Android application. Got the emulator running over here, so it'll take a few moments for that to launch. You can see the bottom right hand corner here, it says it's building the workspace, and it's got a sort of a status that's building up in the Android developer tools. So here is the quick start application, sample application we've had a look at. So I could put an item into here, something like give the demo on the webinar, and click the add button. And what that does is it uses the mobile services client to package all this data up into a JSON package, which is part of the REST call. It goes over to the web service, over to the mobile service, which then writes it into a database and returns the fact that it was successful. So you can see it's done. We can prove that by going into the mobile service itself and going into the data tab. Mobile services, mobile plan key, go to the data tab, and whereas before we had no data, now we should have something that says give the demo on the webinar. Let's just move this out, give the demo on the webinar. So if I go back here and I now say, right, I've completed that item, then that should now mark this item over here, which is currently set up false, to be true. So let's refresh the display, and we can see that's now set to true. Okay, so that's mobile services in a nutshell. There's more that you can do. You can go into the scripts that operate on the various operations like insert, update, delete, and read. And I could put some code in here which did something to that data before it got into the database. Or maybe if I was doing a read, I could put some code in here, some JavaScript, which did something to that data after it came out of the database, but before it was returned to the mobile client, in this case an emulator. Okay, I hope you found that useful. Okay, so that's mobile services. You know, very quick run through mobile services. Again, very easy to get up and started with. Not a difficult job to do. Let's go back to the slides and have a look at the next one, which is cloud services. Okay. So if I go to the portal again, this time I'm going to go to a different subscription I've got. You can see there's another, here's one I prepared earlier there, so you know what's coming. So if I now create a new cloud service, now the question is, I suppose, what is a cloud service? So let me just do a quick sort of view of what that could be. I'm sure you've all got diagrams like this on whiteboards and in documents and so on back at your base, which shows a complicated application with a web front end, that's one tier, a business tier, a database tier at the back end, and then you've always got other bits that hang around, like something which is used for reporting. It calls into these things, something which is using for monitoring. You can imagine other things used for backup and so on. So imagine this. Imagine being able to describe that. Imagine being able to take a photograph of that and then have the photograph, rather than producing that exact image, what it did was it produced an XML description of that. Well, that's what I've got. Okay, and that XML description is called a service model. And I've got part of that description in a file just here. And you can see here it says things like, we've got this role. Oh, let me just zoom in so you can see it. We've got this role which is called the web front end. Its instance count is 10. If we come down here and we look at this one, we've got a role name which is called CRM processing, and its instance count is also 10. So that's 10 servers. There's 10 instances of servers to do these different jobs. Whoops, just went to the wrong place. So back on the slides, what I'm going to do with these documents is each one of, not so much the SQL, but each one of these things is going to need to have some code put onto it. So I need some binary code. So I write some code, and I write it to work on the web front end, and I'll write it to work in this tier here, and I create my service model. So there's the code. It's been deployed onto all the different boxes. And that's called a package, a cloud service package, a CSPKG. I now need to have my service model. So there's my service model. That's the XML representation of this diagram, as I showed you earlier. And, well, that's part of the service model, I should say. And those two things together form a package, and we get a hold of Windows Azure, and we send that to Azure for us. Okay, so we send one sort of set of information. The next thing we need is the remaining description of what this architecture looks like, and we send that. So we've effectively sent two things. We've sent the package, which includes that first part of the service model, to Microsoft. We sent the service model itself, which is the description of what the environment looks like, to Microsoft, and we said, can you build that for me and run it for me? So that's what I'm going to do in this demo. I'm now going to show you how you can create a cloud service. Now, whenever you have a virtual machine, like these, they're all stopped currently, but whenever you have a virtual machine, you also have an associated cloud service. But cloud services stand on their own 2 feet as platform as a service cloud offerings. So let's go through the process of creating one. Now, to do that, I need to have previously written some code and described the environment, and that's done over here. So the code is deployed into this special file called a CSPKG, Cloud Service Package. So the binary code is in there, and it's binary code, in this case, that runs on several types of node, several types of server. So if I go to this, this file here and open it up, we can see some configuration. It says, for example, there's a row of servers called the web front end, and there are 3 of those. There's a row of servers called CRM processing, and there are 3 of those. There's CRM reporting, and there are 2 of those, and so on. We've got 2 instances and 2 instances, and so on. So this is an application with, I think it's got 13 servers. Let's have a look. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 1 at the bottom there makes it 13 servers in this application. So that's a vague description of what the architecture looks like. And then further to that is this other file, And it says, for example, it says, well, you've got this role which is called the web front end, and the size of the VMs there are extra small. So what's an extra small VM? It's 768 megabytes and a single shared core. It's not a very powerful machine, but it's great for a demo. Other things that I've got in here, for example, I say I've got an internal endpoint which opens up port 1049 to that machine, so then other machines can talk to it. By default, the network locks down every single port, so nothing can talk to anything until you open them up using this, what's called a service model. Okay, so this will tell me, for example, that the VM size in the CRM reporting role is also extra small. Okay, so a copy of this file, the CSDEF, is included inside this CSPKG file, and this cloud.cscfg, cloud service configuration file, is one of the configuration files that's sent to the cloud service. So I have to have these two files, the CSDEF and the CS configuration, and they're a little bit like the boxology or the architecture diagram that you draw on the whiteboard that says how many instances you've got in the web role, how many backend instances you've got, what thing is communicating to what over which ports, and so on. And then the actual code is included in this CSPKG file. Okay, so let's assume that that's already been done. How do you create these files? Well, the simplest way is to use Visual Studio, have the Azure SDK installed, and say, create these files for me. There are tools which will allow you to create them manually if you want to, but by far the easiest way is to use Visual Studio. Okay, next thing we need to go to the portal, and I'll say I want a new cloud service. I'll custom create it, give it a URL. Let's call this one Planky CRM because it's a CRM application. Where do I want to deploy it to? I will put it into North Europe. North Europe. I'm going to deploy the package at the same time as I deploy the service, and I'm going to call this production. And this is where I start now looking for those files. So there's that CSPKG file. That's the package which has got the binary code in it. It's got some web front end. It's got code for the middle tier, code for the CRM reporting, code for the policy, code for the backup, code for the monitoring. I also need that configuration file, the CSCFG file. And you can see I've got two environments I can put to, staging or production. I'm going to put this one into production. And I'm going to say, even if one or more of the roles contains a single instance, still deploy it. It's kind of a warning that. It's kind of really saying, do you realize that if this instance fails, then, your whole application might fail? Because the assumption it would make is naturally that you would probably want to have two servers for each of the roles just in case you had a failure. But I'm going to just go with that and click OK. And you can see now it says it's creating the cloud service Planky CRM. So I'm going to pause the recording, but let's just have a look at the time. It's now, what was that, 17:12 and 24 seconds. So let's come back in a few moments after I've paused the recording. So that's now 17:14 and 42 seconds. So what's that, 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes and 15 seconds. It says it's in the running state, but it's not actually deployed yet. So if I come into it, go to instances, we can see all the different servers: app reporting, CRM processing, CRM reporting, monitoring, policy, and the web front end. It says it's creating these VMs and it's waiting for the status of this last one. So when these are all in the running state, then the application will be fully deployed. So we've been going for 2 minutes and 15 seconds so far, thereabouts. So let's keep going. Let's pause the recording again. And how are we doing now? So that's 17:16. That's another minute, isn't it? So that's 3 minutes and 15 seconds it's been going now, near enough. Each of the VMs is now starting. So that means they've all been deployed, they've all been put into their racks, into the data center, they're all on different bits of the infrastructure, that's a really nice feature of how this works. So that if I take, for example, the 3 web front ends, they'll be in 3 separate racks, on 3 separate power supplies, on 3 different battery backup units, on 3 different network segments. So it would take a pretty catastrophic failure to knock out all 3 web front ends within the data center. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording again and we'll see how it's going in a few moments. So you can see we're now close. Most of them are running. There's one busy, bringing roll online. It's initializing. And we're up to 17, 20 and 49 seconds. So what's that? 12, 24 to 20, 45. That's like 8 minutes and 15 seconds near enough. 8 minutes and 20 seconds, isn't it? 8 minutes and 26 seconds. Okay, let's just pause the thing again and we'll see how we're doing with this last system. So it's still busy, but I'm just going to see how it's doing because quite often these things come online. It says the service is running, so that means I should be able to go to the URL and there's the application running. So it's a CRM application that's running. We have in that application a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 servers all running, and it took, let's have a look at the time now, 17:20, call it 17:23, so that's what, 9 and a half minutes. 9.5 minutes to bring all 13 servers online. That's pretty good going, considering that none of these servers had to be built, no operating system had to be installed, no patches had to be installed. If there is a failure of any of these, it will be automatically managed. Let's just imagine that this web server was to fail. It will be taken out of the configuration and a new one brought in automatically by the fabric that runs the software running in the Windows Azure data center. So you can see why it is that cloud services really appeal to developers, because they don't really want to be doing all the management of the infrastructure, and all of that is automated. Great, I hope you found that useful. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Hello? Yeah.
The configuration package and the service package.
Yeah.
What do you use to create that with?
Well, I use Visual Studio. So when you go into Visual Studio and you, I'm running out of time, so I won't have time to show it. But you create a cloud service, and you get nodes that say things like a web role or web front end, whatever you call it. When you, as you double click on those, you get a property sheet that comes up. As you change those things, it creates a CS CFG and a CS def for you. Those are the two files that get modified. You can modify them by hand as well. No, I mean, sometimes you'll find, when we introduce a new feature, a new SDK, when it's brand new, before the tool set arrives, we might say something like, and put these entries into this file. But mostly you can do it through the UI. But sometimes, if you want to create more than one website on a web server, for example, you've got to manually do that. Okay. Right, so that was that. Seen all that. Next. So that's the end of that. So let's talk about the next steps. So if you want to see all the stuff that I've shown you, if you want to see that as a series of videos, you can sit down, slowly watch it, then aka.ms/12 to 16 May demos. You'll be able to get access to all these slides afterwards, so you don't have to write this down, but that's an option. Sign up for Azure, aka.ms/mscloud trial. And also, there's a free training kit, which is very good. There's actually about 35 labs in there that cover all aspects of what I've been talking about here and more. And that's at aka.ms/WATK, Windows Azure Training Kit. There's also the Windows Azure blog, blogs.msdn.com/Windows Azure. My blog, I blog mostly on either cloud or security, or where the two things overlap. Also, whenever I do anything on my blog, I usually tweet it as well. So if you just think about these as the next steps for your journey towards getting more involved with Windows Azure. Great, thanks very much for your time. It was really nice of you not to fall asleep, although I was the guy at the back there who did. Thank you, cheers.